One of the things that, of course, you can never get over is a lack of words. Words are so important for understanding, and a great many philosophers have said in the past, and I think this is also something that scientists think, that without words there is very little thought in the way that we understand thought, very little coherent thinking without words.
Okay, you've got to listen. How many? Two is right. Good boy. There's your 2. Good birdie. How many? Huh? Listen. How many? 3. Good boy. These birds are very intelligent. We don't know how they compare to other types of parrots, but in terms of the types of tests that we've given them, they have come up at the same level as the dolphins and the marine mammals. So in concepts of labeling and categorization, concepts of bigger and smaller, same and different. The only thing that they are not quite up to speed on is the numerical concepts, but we haven't given them all the tests necessary yet. So that's for the future. Hey, what matter? No, we did paper this morning. What matter is this?
Wood.
Wood. Good boy. That's right. Okay, you can have a nut. You got a nut. Just one. You'll get more nuts if you work. Okay. Hey, look, what's here? What tool?
Rock.
Rock. Good boy. That's right. What we're showing here is that Alex's mind works in ways that are not terribly different from your mind or my mind. We show him the same types of objects, ask him the same types of questions that you would ask a young child, and he responds with roughly 80 to 90% accuracy on those types of tasks. And it gives us a feeling for what is going on in that little head of his. What matter?
Chalk.
Chalk. You're a good boy.
One nut.
Okay, you can have another nut. It suggests that there is a level of awareness that we haven't really accepted in these animals. But none of this is a proof of awareness. Certainly working with this bird, you have to realize that he's aware of his surroundings, he's aware of you, he's aware of me. We don't know if he's self-aware. We haven't got any tests that will prove that to my satisfaction. But he certainly has shown through these types of tests that there is a rather major little information processing center in that head, and that's really what I'm looking at. What is this, Alex? Key. Say better. Say better. Key. You're right. Key. Key. Do you want to try this, Kyle? Do you want to tell us? When these birds have labels for the objects, the labels are somewhat idiosyncratic in the sense that a key for Alex is something that he uses to scratch under his chin and around his face. It's not something to use to open a lock. Key! Yes, good boy. What's here?
Beeper.
Beeper, yes, good boy. Beeper. Good birdie. You're such a good boy. One more task, okay? One more task. Okay, then we'll break for lunch. Okay, this is a confounded number task. And this is very complicated. What we have are several different objects of different colors, materials, and we have 2 sets of colors, 2 sets of materials. And if you give this task to a human and you ask the human how many blue block, the humans have to count. They can't do it by a guessing or a perceptual mechanism. By a perceptual mechanism, I mean if I go like that, you know it's 5 fingers. Where you don't count them, you just know it. So we're giving this test to Alex to see how well he corresponds to humans. Okay, Alex, look. Look at all this. Okay, I let him touch them so he sees that they're all different and he feels their difference. Okay, how many blue block? How many blue block?
You want to go back?
I know you want to go back. Just tell me how many blue block and then we'll cut for lunch. How many blue block?
2.
No, there's no 2 on the tray.
3.
3 is right. Good boy. All right, can you do this again?
There are certainly a few spectacular examples of behaviour which was thought to be very clever, to be indicative of some psychological complexity in animals, and then a very disappointing later demonstration that that was not the case. And perhaps the most famous case is clever Hans. It seems that Hans was able to clop with his hoof to count, and he could do addition and subtraction by this method. He became famous throughout Europe as being a counting horse. And then one day, somebody called Funkst, it occurred to him what might be the alternative explanation. When Hans began to clop his hoof, when he was doing a sum, the people around would unconsciously and very slightly bend forwards. And then when Hans got to the number that they, the human observers, knew was the correct answer, then they would almost imperceptibly look up again. And what seems likely was that Hans was just, cleverly, cued in to this. All he did, as far as he was concerned, he just had to clop his hoof, starting when people looked down and stopping when people looked up. And examples like that, as it were, spectacular disappointments, I think, have made many scientists wary.
Can you just tell me, when we're watching this, how do I know this isn't one of these clever Hans, famous clever Hans queuing situations?
Well, part of the reason is the type of questions when I had the 2 objects and I asked 3 questions. He doesn't know what I'm asking unless he listens to the question. Hey, tell me, look, how many? How many?
2.
2 is right. Good boy. Okay, now tell me, what's different? What's different?
Color.
Color is right. Good boy. Now tell me, what color's smaller?
Green.
Green is right. Good boy. Okay, he's not cued by those 2 objects because he has 3 different answers to the 3 different questions. We do, of course, when we do regular training and testing, particularly the testing, we take very strong precautions during testing. Students who never train a particular object are the ones who test him on that object. Even if I were cueing him to say green for something, if I was going good, they'd be green, gray, grape, grain, all sorts of things like that. We're very, very careful to avoid the clever
aware
Hans.
of that, the clever Hans?
Well, the clever Hans itself is totally inappropriate parallel, because what Hans did was to stop tapping when he noticed the experimenter relax. So it was a sequential behavior, and the animal just stopped the sequential behavior. Alex has 100 different responses he could make to any question.
Wanna go back?
I know, and wanting to go back is a very strong one right now.
At a remote site in the Okavango Delta, 2 American professors of biology and psychology from the University of Pennsylvania have come to Botswana to study baboons. Robert Seyfarth and Dorothy Cheney are legendary in the field, mainly on the strength of some ingenious experiments they did in Kenya to decipher the alarm calls of vervet monkeys.
We originally started to work on vervet monkeys because people had reported that they had alarm calls, that apparently different alarm calls for different types of predators.
We use human use of language to get an understanding of how people think, how they interact with one another. It's a sort of window onto their minds. Even though primates don't have language, we can nonetheless use the communication that they do have as a window onto their minds.
Well, when they see a leopard, they give a loud alarm call. And immediately, all the members of the group run up into a tree. They're safe from leopards in trees because leopards can't go out on the small branches that the monkeys can. When they see an eagle, they give a different sounding alarm call, and everyone looks up in the air or they run into bushes. They don't run up into trees, and that's interesting because eagles can take them from trees, sort of zipping through the branches and plucking a monkey off. And the way we investigated is to tape record vocalizations, the calls that monkeys gave when they were actually encountering leopards or martial eagles or snakes. Then we played the alarm call from the speaker and watched to see what the monkeys did. We did this when there were no predators around, so that at this point we're presenting the monkeys with the call and no predator that they can see, to see if the call alone is sufficient to evoke the different responses. When we played them a snake alarm call, they immediately stood on their hind legs and looked in the grass around them. And when we played them a leopard alarm call, all the monkeys ran up into the tree.
Do you believe that primates use language?
I think that many of the calls these animals give function as if they were words, in the sense that they are capable of providing information to listeners. I think there are a number of crucial differences. The first is that no one has yet found any evidence for syntax or grammar, that is, the combining of words into sentences, in any non-human species. And the other crucial difference, I think, is that these animals are not really, as I said before, imputing mental states to others. They're not using their calls in order to inform or in order to deceive. They're not doing it consciously. The calls may end up functioning to inform. If I'm a baboon or a vervet monkey and I give an eagle alarm call, my audience can recognize that there's an eagle nearby. But it's unlikely that I'm giving that call because I recognize that my audience is ignorant and I'm knowledgeable and I want to help them to recognize there's an eagle.
That's what you've been able to find out?
Well, it's a tricky issue, but that's what our evidence points in that direction.
Seyfarth and Cheney are now trying to decode baboon grunts, using the same recording and playback techniques they pioneered in Kenya. It's a long-term project, but they've already got some ideas about what the grunts might mean.
They could be using these grunts to grease the social wheels, much in the way we use conversation, not to achieve some dramatic change in behavior, but just to affect the way things happen. So in that sense, they have a language-like function. When they communicate with one another, are they taking the sounds that they hear and treating them as representations of the thoughts that lie behind them, or are they just taking them as sounds that mean it's cool or I'm angry? That's the question right now.
What's the answer?
The answer with baboons is they're probably not doing that. They're probably not attributing mental states to the callers when the callers communicate. They may be showing us just how complex a society you can have without a theory of mind. There is a lot of infanticide in this population, that when a male comes in and takes over the group, he often goes around and tries to kill the infants. On the other hand, they also want to mate with females and be friends with them, so they're faced with a problem. How do they do this and still maintain close ties? And one of the ways that they seem to do it is by using vocalizations to appease females, to let them know my intentions are benign. And that's a sort of nervous grunt that they use.
Seyfarth and Cheney have been studying primates in the wild for 20 years now. They must know more than anyone else about what animals are thinking.
What do each of you in turn sort of now think about what it's like to be, say, a baboon? Or what can be said about what it's like to be a baboon, if anything?
Sometimes you think every 10 or 15 minutes the world begins anew. And as Dorothy says, you know, you begin to wonder when you see the same females greeting one another 20 times a day. in some respects, they do have this long history of social interaction and long history of social relationships, and that does make a difference. But in other respects, things start new all the time.
It seems as if they don't sit down and really say, hey, this is what I know. They're behaving without thinking, in a sense, although obviously without thinking actively upon what they're doing. And I think you could say they don't know what they know.
The fact is, it's extremely difficult to know what goes on in human beings' mind, not only animals' minds. Even human beings are very isolated and solitary people. I mean, I don't know what you really think. We're isolated. We're alone when we're born, we're alone when we die, and in life we're very solitary too, because we really don't know what's going on in other people's minds. And I think that applies even more to bats and cats and dogs and butterflies. And butterflies can taste with their feet. It often strikes me as a very odd idea if we were walking about tasting through our boots. But I mean, all these things, you can think about, but you're left really wondering. But that doesn't alter my feelings about a better relationship that's possible with animals, even though we're so ignorant about really basic what they're thinking.